Hello everyone, Eric here, and welcome to my computational science video tutorials. In this video I'm going to do some examples for control statements related to Python. And I'm going to just create some functions. So I'm going to create a function that will tell us the sign of some number that we input. For now, I'm just going to return 0 because we'll put the function together. I'm also going to create another function that will tell us the parity of a number x. Right now, we're still going to return 0. Now, the sign of the number is really, it's going to be 1 for positive, and it's going to be -1 for negative, and then it's going to be 0 for 0. So the sign of a number is really going to tell us is the number positive, negative, or 0. The parity is going to tell us if the number is odd or even. All right, so we're going to get the sign, we're going to get the parity. So yeah, and it's basically going to be 0 for even, 1 for odd. All right. So for the sign, we kind of have some stuff in place. You know what? We're actually going to check some stuff. We're going to have x equals 5, y equals 100, z equals minus 24. There we go. All right, so we're going to check these various things, and then we can just say sign x, parity x. Actually, why don't we print x? I'm going to put all these into one statement. So we're going to print x, sign x, and parity x. We're going to print, I'm just going to copy and paste this for the 3. X, y, z, y, z, and update the code here to y, z. So just low copying and pasting, and we're going to check with these numbers. Check our functions with these. Now if we run this program, we do have working functions, and it should give us our numbers, and then 0 is all of our results. So if we run this, we see we have 524, or minus 24. Okay, so for the sign of x, this is going to be pretty easy. We're practicing writing functions with if statements. So I'm going to say if x is greater than 0, well, I mean, we can just put in return 1. So if x is greater than 0, we're going to return 1. Else if, and I'm going to use an elif, x is less than 0, then I'm going to return, oops. Oh, I said lf. It should be elif. Oops. My keyboard is not, all right, there we go. Return. I am not typing well today. So if x is greater than 0, we're going to return 1. If x is less than 0, we're going to return 0. Otherwise, let's just return 0. So 0 means the number is either 0 or it's not greater than or less than 0. So maybe it's some sort of weird situation. There's no error checking here. That's something you may want to do in the future, or if you want to take this more seriously for your code, you may have to update it. All right, so now we have a sign function. We can rerun, and we can see if our example here, if the second column is correct. In fact, I think I might even put a tab in here just to make things space a little nicer. I like tabs. All right, and then we'll put a tab here, here, here. All right, so let's print this and see what it looks like. Oh, yeah, that was kind of not what I wanted, but okay. Anyways, we can still see we have 524, and then we have 1, 1, -1. And so here we can see the sign is correct. The sign for 5 is 1. The sign for 100 is 1. The sign for -24 should be -1. So far, our functions are working. And here you can see how I'm using the if, else structure. And in our function, we can actually put returns in here. But we have to be careful that we always there's always going to be a return path. So if I didn't have a return in this last one, I might say print shoot, shucks. And in this kind of situation, there might not be a value being returned, and this could potentially lead to some sort of error. Here it actually is not leaving an error because we never had the 0. But if we tried to do this with 0, if we changed 100 to a 0, I think this might give us an error. Oh, okay, we get none. So you can sort of see that. Python is not very strict about returning. So if we don't tell it to return something, I guess it returns a value of none. I always try not to let a none happen unless I force it. All right, so this is just sort of how the sign works and how we can have our returns inside of an if statement. But I do caution you to be careful that you always return what you want. Now the parity, I think this is actually very easy if you understand modular arithmetic. You could just say x mod 2, and that would be your answer. It'd be 0 or 1. But I'm going to do this the hard way. I'm going to say if x is, we can basically say if x mod 2 equals 0, then we're going to return 0. And we can say elif x mod 2 is equal to 1, return 1. And we may want to structure a program this way because we may want to expand, if we're going to expand parity from mod 2 to another mod, we may want to have a more sophisticated thing in here. Like we might want to say modulus equals 2 as a default value for our input. So we may want to look at changing this function later to handle mod 3, where we'd have 0, 1, or 2, and then we'd have a little bit more information on parity in that kind of situation. But for now, I think this is just a pretty simple example of if and elif. As I have a little bit of time, I do want to talk just sort of briefly about some nested if structures. So with a nested if structure, you can say, if x equals 5, print x is, x is 5. But we could also say if x is 5, then we might want to say if y is equal to minus 24, so if y is equal to minus 24, print something. Oops. elif z, or here, I'm going to do elif z equals minus 24 if y equals 0, print stuff. Oops. So here I'm just kind of making up some logical tree, but you can sort of see through the indentation, I can see everything here below this if is part of this if statement. And then I come to a second if that's inside of the first if. So we have this x equals 5. And inside of this x if, we have some information for a y if. And then inside this information for a y if, we have a print statement. But if this if fails, we're going to go to this else if. And we can sort of see visually, because of the indentation, that this else if is paired with this y here, and we can only know by indentation. If I back it up here to the first line, then the else if is being paired with the if up here. So indentation is a way that we kind of determine how things are nested in the if statements. And this can be confusing in Python, and we have to be very careful about indenting. And I have seen and encountered a few problems when if I'm trying to figure out something new and I copy some code from online, if I'm copying and pasting, sometimes the indentation doesn't always work out right, especially if it's coming from a web page. So I've seen problems from this. So you do have to be very careful about that. But you can see here I have this elif z equals 24, and inside of this else if I have another if, and we can keep going as deep as we want for as many different if statements as possible. We can keep nesting over and over again. It's my opinion that As a good programming practice, we should try to reduce the number of nesting ifs that we have. But that can be difficult, so we just have to do what we can and see how everything works out. And if you can find a way to reduce them, great. If you can't, I always err on the side of making the program work first and then making it work better later. So here's just a quick look at some nested if statements as we're finishing our look at conditions. And that's everything for today. Thank you for your time and keep on coding.